to download your written material or references for things, or steer you to talks I've given on various kinds of things, and other people have as well. Those whose Hebrew is good enough, I have a large collection of Rav Moshe Shapiro's talks. I'm always very happy to download you some of those or steer you in a direction where you can listen to some of those. I've got Hebrew and Yiddish talks. Also on my website, you'll find a section that presents Rav Mordechai Miller's shirim. He was a genius presenter of the basic course of Jewish Outlook as he received it from Rav Dessler. And there's a link on the website where you'll find his beautiful presentations in classic English expression. There you're hearing a student of Rav Dessler presenting the material, not only the material, but of course, the anecdotes and the personal stories and how he actually learned it from Rav Dessler as well. So you'll find that on the website as well. And I hope to keep adding various other items as well. Okay, I can see that this camera is not focusing, so let's see if we can fool it into focusing. Ah, there we go.
The lens with a tissue.
Thank you. Well, we seem to have managed without that, Jeff, but thanks for your advice. Okay, so what I'm going to do with your permission is take about half an hour to share with you an idea about the counting of the Omer. And I hope you enjoy this idea and find it useful as an explanation for what we are doing in this period of time. And I hope you'll also find it a meaningful life lesson as well. Let me ask a few questions about the counting of the Omer and show you how perplexing I think it is, and then suggest to you a way through this that I hope you'll find meaningful. Now, here are a few questions. Number one, what do we hope to achieve by counting? You know, the concept of the Omer is simply counting days. Count the days. What do we achieve by Okay, that sounds like I was muted. Can you hear me now? Okay. We are undertaking a journey from the unsophisticated, if you like, animalistic level of Pesach. You know that the offering on the second day of Pesach is the Omer, which is barley. Barley's classic animal food. And we move through 7 times 7 weeks. We get to a final situation of 13 times sifted fine flour breads that are offered on Shavuot. That's totally and uniquely human food. And in many other ways, you see that this is a development, just like the week has 7 elements culminating in Shabbos. The 7 weeks of the Omer are also a program like that, culminating in the transcendent spiritual dimension of Shavuot. And if that's the journey, journey of growth, Kabbalistic writings, we are told that Egypt was a conception of the Jewish people. The splitting of the sea was a birth, just like a woman's waters break in birth and the child is born. That's what the Jewish people experienced in going through the ocean. And 7 weeks later, we reach a level of maturity, which is called the day of marriage. Jewish people marrying, so to speak, God in a marital relationship, the mountain held over us like the chuppah, the Torah given like the ring. It is a process of maturation and development. And if that's the case, what do you achieve by counting? This is not unique to Pesach and Shavuos, by the way. There are opinions that a woman waiting for her mikveh immersion, when a woman is waiting 7 days before she can go to mikveh, there's also the concept of counting, not simply waiting 7 days, but nominating. That means designating, counting the days. In fact, although we don't hold this halachically, nevertheless, there's one great commentary. Tosfos asks why she doesn't make a blessing on the process of counting. But be that as it may, there is a parallel between the 7 days a woman is waiting before the immersion, rising to purity, and then bonding with her husband. Similarly, the Jewish people are going through the 7 weeks where we reach a situation of rising to the level of Torah and bonding with Hashem in a very, very close parallel. And again, the question to ask is question number one, what is achieved by merely not numbering the days? That's number one. Question number two, why do we count upwards and not down? Let me explain this question. When you are looking towards a longed for event and you're moving towards a destination, the notion of counting always is a countdown. When they blast off for the moon, the countdown is 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. You count the time remaining. Can you remember the few weeks leading up to your wedding? Were you counting the days of your life that had gone by? No. You're counting the days that are left. 3 weeks left, 2 weeks left, 1 week left. Remember your last few days of school. You weren't counting the days of school that had gone by. That's too terrible to think about. You're thinking about the days that are left. 9, 8, 7. Anytime you're moving towards destination, you count the remaining days. Why do we count the days that have gone by? That's bizarre. There's no question this is an anxious journey. It's a journey of anticipation, moving towards our relationship with God and receiving the Torah. Why are we counting the days that have gone by? And in case you think I'm making too much of this, we call it the counting of the Omer. The Omer is the point of departure, not the point of destination. The Omer is the offering that's offered on the second day of Pesach, right? And therefore, the notion of an Omer is, there's no question, it is a definition of point of departure. We call this the counting of the Omer. You know, it's like saying, I'm getting on the train in London, I'm traveling to Zurich. I can see Dr. Sternbuch is part of our group, right? So I'm going to visit him in Switzerland. And I say, I'm getting on the London train. That's ridiculous. The point of departure is not how you name the journey. You name it for the point of destination. Why is this journey not named for destination of Shavuot and Torah? Why is it named for the point of departure? We're counting the Omer. The Omer is what's happened already. Ladies, gentlemen, are we together? Are you hearing me? Are we? Okay. Next question. Why don't we count the first day? What's wrong with the first day? We count from the second day of Pesach. This is a count from Pesach to Shavuot. That is definitely the notion. In fact, we have many sources that indicate that just like you have a festival of first and last days and Chol HaMoed in between, the intermediate days of the festival, Pesach is the first day, Shavuot is the last day, and the counting of the Omer is like a Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed is the days between the first day and the last day. It begins on day 1 and it finishes on day 7, right? In Israel anyway. And here, what do? We don't count the first day. We start counting the Omer the second day of Pesach. What happened to the first day? And even more perplexing, we don't count the last day either. That is really bizarre. We get to the Torah says very clearly, count 50 days. Tisperu chamishim yom, count 50 days. We take what the Torah says very, very seriously, down to the hair's breadth of fastidious observance. The Torah says count 50 days, we count 49. Why? We get up on the 50th day, which is Shavuot, we take a cup of wine, we make Kiddush, and we celebrate Yom Tov. Why did we get up on the 50th day and count the day? The Torah says count 50. By the way, there are other examples of things that are like this. The Torah says that when a person needs 40 lashes, for example, Arba'im yakenu, 40 times you shall lash him. The Talmud says it means 39. We give 39. It does not say 39, it says 40. Now the rabbis can come and make adjustments and interpretations, but 40 is not 39. So the question is, why do we count only 49 days and we leave the climax, the ultimate day, we leave it uncounted? We don't say a word about its number. That is very, very strange. These are some of the questions, I think, that need to be understood when we talk about the Omer. Let me suggest to you a way through this territory, which I hope will give you a principle that you can use in life. First of all, let me point out to you that the counting of the Omer is not merely the passage of time. This is building a reality which is utterly, utterly transcendent. Anyone with any sense will realize we're talking about moving towards Torah. We're talking about moving towards an intimate relationship, which is a marital bond with Hashem. That he should kiss us with the kisses of his mouth, as it says in Shir HaShirim. We're talking about a marriage that will last through history. That will result in a Torah being brought down to the world. You know, the word Omer adds up to 310. Omer adds up to 310. 310 by definition is a definition of the spiritual world. The Gemara says that every tzaddik, every righteous individual will be rewarded in the world to come with 310 worlds. What will be your reward in the world to come? 310 worlds. Shaya olamot, right? That means lahanchil oyava yesh, to give those who love me 310 yesh. Yesh in Hebrew means existence, reality of existence. It exists, and it adds up to 310. As an aside, you might like to know, why 310? If you'd like to choose a number that's a number of completion, it should be 620. We know that there's 620 commandments in the Torah, right? 613 plus 7 non-Jewish commandments, so to speak, 620. These are called the 620 columns of light, the Tarach Amudei Or, 620 in Hebrew. I'm sure you're making the calculations ahead of me. 620 in Hebrew is Keter, right? Keter, this is the crown. If you look in the 10 commandments in the Torah, you'll see there's 620 letters. So 620 is always the root definition of all the elements of Torah. And if 620 is the root notion of the elements of Torah, why do you only get 310? Why do you only get half as a reward? So one of the explanations is because you're supposed to be married. You're supposed to be married. There's half you and half your partner. You're only a complete individual when you're married, right? I know some of us are a little skeptical about that, but that's the way it was designed to be. There was a famous Hasidic Rebbe in Jerusalem who used to give his students apples. The unmarried ones, he would give half an apple. That's the concept. And therefore the number is 620, but it's supposed to be made of that primordial unity between the male and female dimensions in the world. But be that as it may, the counting of the Omer is not simply a number of days. It is the number of days that define reality. You're talking about a number of days that build an ultimate spiritual world. And so the question is, again, why do we count in this peculiar fashion all the questions that I've raised as questions? I'd like to add one more question for your homework. I won't deal with this in this talk. It's a little bit more complex and requires a bit more depth and background. But I give you a question for you to work on your own, and I hope this gives you a couple of sleepless nights at least. And the question is that the Ramban, the great commentator, the Ramban, and a few others hold that this is a mitzvah that has the unique quality of not being a time-bound mitzvah. Of all the positive mitzvahs in the Torah, as I'm sure you know, there are two categories. There's mitzvahs essay shazman groma, that is positive mitzvahs that are occasioned by time, and ones that are not occasioned by time. A mitzvah that's not occasioned by time, like giving charity, for example, you can do it at any time. A mitzvah that is time-bound is wearing tefillin, which is done during the daytime, or tzitzis, which is in the daytime, or sitting in a sukkah, what must be done at a certain time. Time-bound mitzvahs are uniquely different than non-time-bound mitzvahs, and it has halachic implications. For example, a woman is not bound by the time-bound mitzvahs. Deep spiritual reasons for that, why she does not need those. But there's a difference between mitzvahs that are occasioned by time and ones that are not. And here comes some statement of the Ramban, which seems extremely bizarre. The Ramban says that the counting of the Omer is not a time-bound mitzvah. And that really needs explanation. What could be more time-conditioned mitzvah than this? You're counting time, you do it at the beginning of each day, you're numbering. What about this mitzvah is not time-bound? And the Ramban holds, you look in his commentary in the Gemara in Kiddushin, the Ramban says, this is a mitzvah, this is not a time-bound mitzvah. That is very perplexing. And we won't have time to go into that, but I recommend that to your research, and I'm sure you'll benefit from thinking about it. Let me suggest to you an answer through some of these questions that I've raised. And again, what we're looking for here is a life lesson, not only an explanation of the counting of the Omer. And here's the key. The world is made of parts. The world is made of differentiated and fragmented parts. We are used to, in science, we refer to this as a quantized world. Right? Quantum physics has taught us that everything in the world, even units of energy, come in quanta. The world is made of parts, specific and finite parts. And parts or details or breakdown products are the opposite of the spiritual world. Hashem is one. Hashem Elokeinu is one. And the world is not one. The world is many. And here's the question. How do you get from a world of many, of breakdown, of differentiated and fractured parts? How do you get that? How do you get from that world to a oneness? Let me say that again. How do you get from a world of differentiation and breakdown where each element shows only what it is to a totality and a grasp of oneness? And here's the key. The only way you can get there is from here. When you assemble parts correctly, what happens is a oneness manifests that transcends the parts. It's very hard to put this into words. Let me try to give a few examples that I hope will make it plain. Here's an example, music. And I choose this example advisedly because in music, the conventional scale we use in Western music is the 7-note scale. There are other scales as well, but let's talk about that one, which is very parallel to the 7 weeks of 7 elements that we talk about in counting the Omer. What is music? You play a few notes, each note of which, please listen carefully and stay with me, this is critical to understand, even though the words are difficult and clumsy. Each note that you play is utterly insignificant, completely insignificant. Play each note at a time, plink and a plonk and a plonk and a blink. Each plonk and plunk and blink is insignificant. And somehow miraculously, when you put them together, something emerges called music. In physics today, they call it an emergent phenomenon. An amazing thing. You put a few notes of music together in the right proportion, each one done correctly, something emerges. It's very hard to put this into words, but if you've ever been moved by music, you will know what I mean. When you analyze it, you find that the music is nothing other than the notes. There's nothing else in there. And amazingly, you can't play music, you can only play notes. If you want to produce that experience that we call music, you can't play the music, you play the notes. When you play each note correctly, with a sense of where it has to go and how it fits in, something happens called music, which is transcendent. The music, here comes the key. The music is not another note. It's the totality of the notes when put together correctly. And that's the secret. If you want to see God, who is transcendent, you will only see him through assembling the parts correctly. If you want to hear music, there's only one way to do it. When each individual note is played correctly, something happens called music. By the way, just as a complete aside, any of you into music? Do I have any music enthusiasts here? Anyone? No one? No poetics? Okay, good. So if you're interested, email me on the website. And I mentioned this recently. A friend of mine is a doctor in Bnei Brak, happens to be an ophthalmologist in Bnei Brak, Dr. Desatnik. So he sent me a beautiful a link to an orchestra, believe it or not, playing a piece called Plink Plunk Plonk. There's a musical piece called Plink Plunk Plonk. Exactly what I said. It's a beautiful piece. You see the orchestra is all assembled. The conductor's a lady. And here's what she does. She walks over to the cello player and she takes away his bow. Then she walks over to the second cello and she takes away his bow as well, right? So the orchestra is left, they're all left without their bows. And then they play an entire piece, which is called Pizzicato. Pizzicato in music is where you play by plucking the notes, no bows at all. And it's a beautiful piece that is played only, it's got a lot of humor to it. Look it up or ask me for the link, and that's the classic piece called Plink Plunk Plonk, and they're teaching exactly what I'm telling you. And therefore, the pizzicato in music is more than any other form of music. It's individual notes. When the bows play, the violins and the cellos play, you get the illusion of continuity. But when you're playing individual notes, and somehow they come together in a very, very moving experience. All moving experiences, all transcendental experiences on life are like that. What is a great poem? It's an assembly of meaningless words. Each word is completely useless and meaningless on its own. Dennis, are you with me? I hope you're with me in hearing. Each word in the poem is meaningless. And somehow when you put them together, if it's a masterful poem, it can transport you into another world. It's not the words, it's the totality and interaction of the words together. A great painting, a masterpiece of a painting. Each brushstroke is ridiculous. It's completely meaningless. And somehow when you stand back and you see the effect of all of them together, and it's not this brushstroke or that stroke, but everyone is essential. There was a style of painting during the Impressionist era. It was known as pointillism. The pointillists, Seurat, for example, the French pointillists, they used to paint by putting dots on the canvas. If you come up close and you look at it right in front of your eyes, it's a bunch of different colored dots, completely meaningless. You step back and suddenly the dots coalesce and they form something. There's a form of Jewish art like that, by the way. My great teacher of Simcha Wasserman used to love it. He used to say, that's real Jewish art. What is it? It's a painting, for example, let's say it's a line drawing of Queen Esther. And as you come up close, you see the lines are actually the words of the book of Esther, which means it has particulate meaning as you come up close. And when you step back, it has a, right? I'll never forget the experience. I'll never forget the experience when President Herzog was president of Israel. This is a long story and I don't want to sidetrack, but I'll just, too moving a story not to mention to you. You know, he was raised in the family. He was the son of the great Rav Herzog, the chief rabbi of Eretz Israel, right? And he, as a young man, he left it and he went into politics and he left his religious background behind. And on one occasion in Israeli politics, I don't want to go into this, there was a comment, right? Somewhere along the line, there was an insulting comment made about Osameach Yeshiva and the religious world and the enmity between them and people who wear kippahs of different colors was very, very offensive. So the Rosh Yeshiva of Osameach invited him on a state visit, right? You insult us. You say that the Baal Tshuva world and the religious world, you insult us as being narrow-minded and reactionary. You know, he invited him on a state visit. So President Herzog arrived in the yeshiva, and of course what the yeshiva did was they made sure the base medrash was full of a couple of hundred people who had at least a PhD or an MD. The most intellectual. I mean, there were thousands of students. I was sitting there together with my brother-in-law. We both MDs. There was Rabbi Gottlieb, who's a professor of philosophy. Like the president walked with the entourage and the TV cameras from one table to the next in the base medrash. each of the students that he met had more academic degree. It was very, you call us mindless and uneducated. And then they gave him a personal presentation. They took him into a side room, and with the cameras rolling, they gave him, Omer were genius. Anyone who came for an official visit, they gave a very moving gift, something very cleverly and carefully chosen. And on this occasion, they gave him unexpectedly a gift. What was the gift? There was a student in Omer at the time who was a genius at this type of art. He could draw any picture using the words that he chose. And with all the cameras rolling, they unwrapped and gave President Herzog a picture. It was the most beautiful picture of his own father, Rabbi Herzog. And the words that were written to form the picture were the drosha his father had given on the importance of learning Torah. He couldn't hold back the tears in front of everyone. He broke down crying. I said, okay, beautiful stuff. But be that as it may, the details are one story. And when the details fit together, they form something else. And ladies and gentlemen, everything meaningful in the world is that way. A book or a story is one incident after another. And when that final page arrives and it all comes together, something happens in the totality. In English, we say it's greater than the sum of the parts. Greater than the sum of the parts. All meaningful experiences are like that. They're real, but they cannot be tied down. You can't show me that. It's not this word or this brushstroke or that note. When you put them together, that's what emerges. And let me suggest to you that your life should be that way. What is a love between two people? What should a marriage be? A number of days gone by, a number of years gone by, one more after another, not amounting to a crescendo of musical experience? That's not love. A love experience, the building of a meaningful relationship, a deep friendship, a marital relationship, whatever it is year after year, day after day, month after month, of another act of kindness, another detail, another smile, another act of self-control. Each of them more or less meaningful. But when they're put together and years have gone by, something should have been constructed that far transcends the details. Let me suggest to you that that's what you should be. If you are maturing and years are going by and you're not becoming a larger person, a bigger person, you're failing. Success in life doesn't simply mean that one day goes by and, tomorrow shouldn't be worse than yesterday. No, each day should be an incremental amplification of all that has come before. We call this in Torah Zeichel Ledvarim Harbe, a person who puts more Torah ideas into their mind and a deeper level of maturity and a more sophisticated level of understanding. There should be a constant amplification that takes you into new worlds. I'll give you an extreme way of saying this. Again, this is very clumsy, my words, but people who have life experience will know what's being said here. Let me give you another example. First of all, I see a few people on my screen whom I must greet, some old friends. I see a Kucher family from the Southwest, and a number of old friends. It's a pleasure to see you. But, and Mrs. Kucher, this is true even in the United States. And that is when parts come together to form a whole. Let me give you an example the Talmud says. Listen to this incredible statement of the Gemara. The verse says, what is the difference between Oved Elokim v'she'eno avadoi? What's the difference between somebody who serves God and somebody who doesn't serve God? Listen carefully. What's the difference between somebody who serves God and somebody who does not serve God? Well, I would imagine there's a chasm of difference between them. Says the Talmud, the person who serves God revises his learning 101 times. The person who's not serving God revises only 100 times. Again, if you called a servant of God, you've gone over your studies 100 times intensely. If you've 101 times, if you've only done it 100 times, you're not called a servant of God. You know what's being said here? The chasm of difference, the categoric difference between mastering a thing to the level of 100 times compared to 101 is as you didn't begin at all. You know why? Because here's the mistake. You think when you do it 101 times, you've added 1%. That is not correct. That's not correct. When you do it the 101st time, you've amplified the previous 100. You've moved into a whole new category. Again, let me tell you the way the Talmud tries to express this. It says like this: if you want to know what this meaning is, what's the difference between 100 and 101, go out to the donkey hire, to the donkey, today we'd say it's the Avis car hire, right? But in Talmudic times, go learn this from the donkey hire, the local donkey Avis, or Hertz, whatever it was. How do you learn it from there? I'll tell you how. You go to the donkey hire and you tell the fellow, I want to hire a donkey for 10 kilometers. The guy says, yeah, okay, here's the price, 10 kilometers, that's the price. The next day you come back and you say, I want to hire a donkey for 11 kilometers. The guy says, right, it's double the price of yesterday. You say double, I'm only going 1 extra kilometer. The guy says, no, from 0 to 10, we charge one price. From 10 to 20, we charge double. That's how it works here. You say, but I'm only going, no, you're in a new category. That's what the Talmud says. When you revise 100 times, you reach a certain level. The 101st is not 1%. It's an addition of all that you've done before is amplified into a whole new world. And self-development should be a crescendo of amplification. Right? This is what it amounts to. And if we're not simply talking about another day and another day and another day, every new Torah idea, every new element of self-control and self-refinement and building of a marriage or a love relationship or a parental, whatever it is, or academic or professional expertise, you should be moving into new dimensions. And it's all only constructed by the parts coming together in a way that transcends the parts. Let's go back to the questions we began with, and let me suggest that this notion, correctly understood, will answer those questions. Why do we count up and not down? We don't count down towards Torah. You can't do Torah. You can't build that. You can't do something that will result in Torah. All you can do is put the pieces together. We start with the Omer. That's what you have. Good. Let's put one brick down. Let's put another brick. When you put all the bricks together, the building results. You can't do the music. You can only do the notes. So let's play the first note correctly. Great. Let's play the second note. When you put the notes together, the result happens. Let me put it to you this way. You know why we don't count the 50th day? It's not another number. It's the music. We count it by not giving it a number. We count the 50th day by not counting it. If you got up on the 50th day and you gave it a number, today's 50, it's one more step. This is not one more step. This is the destination. This is not another step of the journey. You'd be insulting it and breaking it down to one of the notes. If you go to a symphony and you count the notes and you hear each note and you haven't heard the music, you're missing the point big time. And therefore, the reason we don't count the last day of the Omer, of course we're counting it. We're counting it by not giving it a finite number, by realizing you've reached a dimension called Torah, which is completely and utterly transcendent. Why did we count the first day, by the way? Because God does that. You know why we don't count the first day? Because we begin with an explosion of revelation. The first day is miraculous. Pesach means to leap over. Pesach means to leap over. You leap to the 50th level. And then you start working, counting the days. We call this fly now, pay later. The reason we don't count the first day is because that's miraculous. The first day, it's inspiration. It's the lightning that you see in a flash of brilliance, which is completely transcendent. And that's before the count begins. And then once you've got the inspiration, you get the message, now start walking through the desert. And if you put one step in front of another and you keep doing that loyally, okay, that's the way it goes. The first you might call the male experience, the first moment when Hashem does it all, when a child is conceived, what does the father give? Half a genetic code, that's all. That's all. That's all a man does. No pain, no suffering, no long-term work, no risk, no danger, nothing. It's the woman who does that day after day after day of a pregnancy with all the long drawn-out work that's involved, all the construction. When that baby's born, every cell in that baby's body comes from the mother. The father only somehow begins the process, but it's the mother who builds that. And therefore, we don't count the first day because he does that. But our work begins on the second day. And the 50th day is the result, which is not one more day, and therefore we don't count it. And that's why it's called counting of the Omer. We start with the point of origin, we pile on top of that. Omer means to pile up in Hebrew. The Omer means a pile, a sheaf, something gathered together. And therefore, what I'd like to leave you with is the thought that the counting the Omer is a counting towards Yesh. It's a counting towards an intrinsic existence. And the meaning of life is that which is transcended. And the tragedy of modern science, the tragedy of modern materialism is that they're deaf to the music. They're masters at looking at the details. Put it under the microscope and break it down and look at its chemistry, and they're not hearing the music. as my friend Rabbi Kagan says, it's like people going to a concert. They walk into the concert and they with microscopic attention to the movements of the musicians and to their garments and to their, but they're not hearing the music. They're missing the point. True, you cannot put it under a microscope. You cannot examine it scientifically. You can't examine its chemistry. Absolutely, it doesn't have a number. But it's the result of all the numbers putting together. And if you're missing that, you're missing the point. And therefore, the meaning of the counting of the Omer is the great paradox of life. You can only get beyond this world through the world. You can only get to the music through playing the notes. But you have to have an ear for the music. When you're davening and you're saying those words in the siddur, each word is meaningless. And it's all the same. We all say that, but the music shall be yours. It's your tefillah, your actions in the world. And when you do the same mitzvahs as I do, but it must be your music. Right? When you learn this piece of Torah, it's your unique approach. You hearing the music. When two great musicians play the same piece of music, they're utterly different. And by the way, when the same great musician plays the same piece the next time, it's not the same as it was the time before. But that's because he becomes, the verse says, V'haya kanagen emanagen, when the musician became the music. We translate it loosely when the musician began playing. But the Kabbalistic translation is when the musician became the music. I once had the great experience of hearing Arthur Rubinstein. I was a teenager and I heard him play a concert, one of the world's great pianists. After the concert, someone asked him, what's your favorite piece? He said, the one I'm playing. If there's total absorption in it, and each part is done with great perfection, and it's amounting to something which transcends the parts, then you've achieved the point. And Torah is a transcendent experience. Relationship with God is transcendent. These are not things that can put into the lab. This is not another word in the poem. It's not another event in the story. And Jewish history is like that. What the Ramban calls walking through Midbar HaAmim, the desert of the nations, as we go through history. Each Jewish experience, each Jewish triumph of history, each Jewish tragedy that adds to what we are. Each of those events, utterly unintelligible in its own right. When history ends and all of that is put together and the great symphony, the cosmic symphony is heard, then the meaning will be plain. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I think I kept you a little over the half an hour that I promised. But thank you very much for joining me. It's a great honor and pleasure to have you as subscribers to our effort. This is a new effort, this website. And any suggestions, you want to add anything or be in touch via the email, I'm always open to trying to provide what people, anything we put out there, you're welcome to share. You can always share it with the greatest of pleasure. And thank you very much for joining me on this journey. And perhaps in a few weeks' time, if people want to, we'll do another little exclusive meeting with the greatest of pleasure. And thank you and have a wonderful few weeks leading to Lag BaOmer and to a great Shavuos, which is utterly beyond the world. All the best.